The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. It's time for our second part. Actually, still part one, but the Q&A session of part one of our previous webinar on the topic of IFC collaboration using Archicad and all the software on the other side. So we'll only have about half an hour, so we'll try to use the best of our time. The idea of today will be just to go about a few questions as we had it on the last webinar, and of course, any new questions that might be posted on the panel today. So feel free to send any questions if you find it appropriate. So let's start with our webinar then. My name again is Nando Mogollon. I'm a digital design consultant in Central Innovation. I'm trained as an architect and as a BIM manager, and I have roughly about 18, 19 years of industry experience across a few different countries. The idea of today will be to go through a Q&A of some of the bits and pieces that may have been tricky or may have happened too fast on our previous webinar. I already have a few of them, so we already have some material, but if anything, feel free to ask any new questions on the spot. If that is all right, let me check how many people do we have on board. Quite a few already. I'm glad to see quite a few friends on that list, including some old friends from Canada. That's nice. All right. So without any further delay, let's start going on with this. So one of the first questions, and I'm going to put it up front because it's not quite related to the IFC topic, but look, it's a valid question, something I didn't spend too much time, but just in case, I'll give you the quick answer on this. How do you get an aerial side photo on the model? So what that was referring to was the fact that on this particular model, probably you can see that, we have like the base of the model is a large mesh for the terrain, which is displaying an aerial picture of the site. So what that is nothing but a screenshot of Google Maps. So you can actually see there in the lower right some of the typical iconography on Google Maps. So all I did there was to take a screenshot of that picture. And the trick in there is just to get that picture into your file. And the key there is to scale it to the real size, which is not going to be very precise, or it's just going to be as precise as your photographical scale for measurement, which in our case will be those 20 meters there. So it's not quite super accurate, but you can get it done somehow. Again, quick steps to do that. Easy done if you just bring in a picture to your a worksheet that you can work with. That should give you the space to scale this picture up and down. The whole point will be to scale these so that your graphical reference, say like that one there, may have close to the 20 meters that I was seeing there being referenced. That's going to give you then a real size of this picture, and that size, as described up here, will be the length and or the width and height, or the width and length as you prefer, in millimeters. And then when you want to apply that to this terrain or mesh, all you have to do is to create a surface so that the surface itself, Let me show you here, so that the actual surface, that one there, will have the same size in meters right there as you have it on the worksheet. So it's a fairly old trick, but it's a nice one to have, and it's not one of those things that comes out of the box or it's super obvious. So all you have to do in short is make sure you create a surface with that link map, which you may want to include into your embedded library or linked library, either way. And the only real trick in there is to make sure that these sizes in here are the same as your bitmapped sizes right here. That's pretty much all it will take to get it done. All right. Hope that is being solved. That was a question from Carla from CJ Architects in New Zealand. Hope that solves the question so far. Let's keep moving on. Daniel from MAP Architects in New Zealand posted a couple of fairly interesting questions. First one being, in my past video, I actually did move the survey to the real world location. Survey as in a DWG survey. Yes, that part is true. And the following question will be, how is this relationship established with the survey point, which is the survey point object that I place in Archicad? Well, the technical answer to that is none. So there's no real relationship in between me moving the survey. Let me give a video of that in here. So that will be, for those of you who may missed a previous webinar, that was basically me taking these, which is a DWG that I brought in here as a drawing. And then I moved that inside a worksheet that I've called survey to the real location. By real world location, we mean making sure that one of these control points, typical georeference points that surveys will have, making sure that the eastings and northings, which is basically a distance in X and Y, will match the real location in the internal coordinate system of Archicad, but not on the floor plan, actually only within the context of a worksheet. By doing so, if you take a look at these coordinates that I have in here, what you'll see there is that these numbers, when I match that point, should be the same. So that's me moving a survey to the real location. I want to have that, perhaps not for the sake of the exercise we did, but I want to have that for further reference. And you'll see how that becomes relevant once we need to deliver a asset information model. That is a model that actually reflects the real world coordinate system. In the case of this one exercise, you need to reflect the coordinate system of the map grid of Australia. So the MGA zones, I believe this one is 56 or similar, to that real location. So I need that because I want to make sure that I still can reference back and forth to the real coordinates. But the one that I really use for the sake of matching a point that I can reference was the project coordinates. Project coordinates is nothing but the project or the survey sort of rotated and moved along the plan so that I didn't have to move my project. So this is one that I actually use to accurately locate the survey point that I will put matching this control point. So technical answer will be, yep, there's no real link in between one and the other, but it's just for reference. I can see Daniel already following up on a question there saying, It also lets you identify real world points in your model. Well, it will let me identify real MGA coordinates on this. That will be correct if I simply just go and reference my project to this. So if you want to know, in blue, you can see my actual building. So if I want to know what's the coordinate point in MGA coordinates, will be this point in here, whatever I have matching in here. It is recommended, just like always, whenever you can use a favorite that is using the project coordinates, which is an object in the library. Let me use this for now, and you'll see what I mean by that. If I place that point in here, these will be the project coordinates that are related to the 0 that I've used. That's there. But if I use the real MGA coordinates, that's for the asset coordinate system. Actually, let me take this, do that, and place that. Then the reference point that is measuring from 0, it's actually giving me eastern and northern points of the model. So you can always get a point in plan view, wherever location you get. And those are going to be real MGA related coordinates. And again, that's doing the transfer from the real world coordinate system to the project or local coordinate system. All right, let's keep moving along. Is it possible to include the survey point object as a 3D object for helping consultants confirm location? Not really. That object tends to get hidden by default. You can show it, but typically it won't show up. And in any case, if you can, if you go and take a look at it, it's really more like a flat object that doesn't really help you much describing what the point is. That being said, it is common practice to use a couple of other things. So I have already another file of the same project prepared in here. So let me show you what you can do to achieve a similar thing. It is very common to export a reference location file. So what that is, it's a reference file that contains no geometry for the model itself, so no project geometry. Sometimes, like I did in this case, mimicking some sort of a property line, if you like, or a site line. You can include that as a reference. That's one example. Another example is this, which is, again, only for reference. On a real project, you won't do this because that will just simply multiply grid lines, which is, in the context of Archicad, is unnecessary. But for the context of a reference IFC file, might be a good idea, which is having all these grid lines, basically, typically, grid line 1 and A, or whatever two perpendicular grid lines you choose, to have them on every single story. That will serve as a reference. And it will save not only the location of the file, but also every single story. Hint, something else that you won't find in most of the, you won't find it as clear in documentation, which is when you export an IFC file, only those stories or levels that contains geometry or some sort of information will be exported as part of the IFC model. So if you want to export every single story for reference, which is a good practice, you want to include some sort of an item that forces the IFC to write that story down into that reference file. So an example of that will be those grid lines. So I can export a grid line per story, knowing that then my project will export every one of those 24 stories that I have on my project. Or another one that it's more like a gimmick, but hey, if it works, it works. Exporting a cube, like so, which in this case I've used just a simple cube object within Archicad. And that is just a 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter cube that I've placed on the zero of the project, which might help as a reference for whatever software it's being used on the other side. It's kind of a brute force solution. It's not as fancy as making sure that you're exporting the project in real coordinate systems and then not need to move it anywhere else. But it actually works. And then when you export this, the actual use of a file like this is that once I move it, or if I open it, like in this case, in Solibri Anywhere, which is the viewer version of Solibri that you can download for free, you will see that every grid line has been exported, the cubes have been exported as well, and every single story has been exported as well. So you can have this without anything else on the project, and you will typically use this, again, fairly good practice, to share it across all stakeholders so that everyone ensures that their project will land in the right place. So everyone should align themselves either to the grid line, the project location, or if all things fail, they can also use this cube at zero just to make it match their project zero or base point or survey point, whatever software they're using on the other side. The language might change, but they're 000 from their local project origin. Still, the file will be geolocated as we showed the last time. So if I look at this from the top, you'll see that relocation and all of that will affect. When I say real location, I'm talking about whatever coordinate system was chosen for this, not so much the actual MGA. All right, let's go back to my file in here for a second. Maybe let's go back to this one here. And let's take a look at other questions that I have coming through. So all right, these entities, the ones that I've included, I believe, need to have any classification, IFC classification? Yes. Yeah. By default, I believe we're talking about, let's go back to this. I guess we're talking about the cube itself or the grid line. For the grid line, you don't need it, since the grid lines are a special kind of IFC entity, and it will go through even if you don't have it classified as anything or classified as a proxy. It will go through as part of the typical IFC entities that have been included. That being said, you want to be careful that the grids are included in the translators. Let me give you a hint of that. If I go and check the IFC translators, you'll see that the geometry conversion here will allow me to export the survey point on its own. That's the one thing that you want to check before checking anything else. And the grid line itself will be transferred. Sorry, that'll be here. No. Why is it that you never find the things when you want to find them right on the spot? Yeah, hold on. There we go. The model filter, it's the one option in Archicad that it might be good to check if you want to ensure that the grid system will be transferred. So as long as these grid system and elements are ticked, if the box is ticked, then the IFC will transfer those grid lines if they are visible, and then if you have decided to export everything that is visible. Again, that needs to be saved with the translator, and as we mentioned the last time, these translators you have in here are a fairly good starting point, but it is common and best practice to start from one of those, depending on what is required from the BIM execution plan, and build on top of that your translators that are specific for project needs. That is best practice, what's, above all, since that's going to guarantee that you're matching whatever requirements have been asked for. Let me double check another one of those questions that I have in here. I've got another question there. How do you coordinate or communicate changes in story heights during the project design phase? Again, this file you see in here, that's probably one of those that you want to use as a reference, not only for changes in project heights, but also changes in grids. Grids, if you start sharing files early on, the one thing that will happen is grid lines will start moving along just because they need to start matching whatever updates on geometry, structural may be needed. So it is, as far as I am aware of, or not knowing any better, this reference file that dictates story heights, like so, and also grid lines. If I had a full set of grid lines in here, which I don't, I just have the two major or corner grid lines. But if I had a full set, it will be the same. Then this one file here will be the file that everyone should be following. So in Archicad will be an easy pick because I can link in that IFC file and then make sure that I'm matching to that. But as it is more common, you'll be surrounded by Revit users. So on the Revit side, they can also do the same thing. They can actually not hot link, because the terminology there will be just linking the IFC file. And then they'll use a Revit feature that is called, well, they could do it manually, but they could do a feature called copy and monitor, in which case they'll be able to see the stories and match to those stories and see these grid lines and match these grid lines. So good practice, rather than everyone having their own stories, will be to assume that a file like this is the one dictating what it's known, or better known as, federated floors. So it might be that structural engineers have little levels or working planes in between. That's up to them. That's fine. They can have that, but it is indicated that only the levels, or the levels that are supposed to be stories, are the ones dictated by this one file. So it's a file that says these are the official federated floors. Please follow these. Everything else, you can have it for your own sake. Just don't export that as a story. Keep it as a reference level, which is an option in any case for those users or those consultants that you may have using Revit. So if you, for whatever reason, see extra stories, very common for mechanical and structural, don't worry, that can all be fixed. All they need to do is to make sure that those are not to be building levels. I think that's a term that's used, but anyway, so that will be my answer to that. Let's see, we're already running a little bit out of time. So while we get any further questions, let me do a little bit of housekeeping on some of the bits and pieces that I did last time. On the exercise we did on part 1, we simply made an assumption. And I want to just clarify the assumption or make it explicit, which is in that example, we were assuming that we were to dictate the project's coordinates. That's why I went along and said, you look, I don't mind, I can keep my project origin in there, which is the Archicad origin. And for the sake of exporting the IFC, I was saying, well, my new origin, for the sake of producing a project information model, our origin will be this point in here, which is only a reference to the survey that I have, so that when anyone asks me, I'll say, yeah, that point there that we're using is a matching point for this control point in real life. So you still are having a nominal reference to that survey point. So that was the assumption we were making. Maybe I need to clarify for those of you that are not quite up to speed. You can hear me saying project information model and also asset information model. That's kind of ISO 19650's standards. Project information model is basically any information model or BIM model that relates to design and construction, while the asset information model relates to the actual building. When we share a project with these type of local coordinates, that tends to refer to the process of design and construction. So a project information model rather than the real one. It is also very common that when you export these for asset management, then you don't use these points, you actually use a real world coordinates. That's pretty much what I have on the housekeeping. Let's wrap it up then. Again, keep track of our new and weekly webinars. I'm going to keep doing these at this point in time for half an hour, so I hope it won't take too much time of your day. We'll do one-on-one. We'll do a Q&A session followed the exercise session. So next time we're going to do a part 2 of the same exercise. And then just for the sake of keeping everything on the table, I'm going to make the different assumption on the beginning of our project, meaning that we don't get to dictate the project location. We have received the project location. So next Tuesday, I'll see you here, and we'll run through that exercise where we're going to assume that the project location is given to us. We actually need to adapt to that, which is also a possibility. So it's a slightly different process, but concepts are the same. Again, relevant help center articles. Please make sure you check them out. Survey point it could be a tricky one, so go take a read. It's not rocket science. You just read it slowly with a little bit of patience, and it will make all sense. Getting help in Australia, make sure you get your queries to support AAC Australia at centralinnovation.com, and the New Zealand part similar to that, NZ and support at centralinnovation.com. General inquiries, any questions on the software and your subscription, customer success, or just simply give us a call on the number on the screen. Same thing in New Zealand. So that is all for today. Sharp 30 minutes. If you have any further questions, guys, just feel free to send them through, and we'll take a look at that on next session. Again, please register, and we'll stay put to that, and we'll see you then on next week. Thank you and goodbye.